Back in 2021, I was driving a tanker truck that transported gasoline. My job was to visit different gas stations and refill the underground fuel tanks beneath each station. It was a calm job. If you did things carefully, there was no reason for anything bad or strange to happen. I had been doing it for years, always visiting the same stations. And honestly, I never thought something unusual could ever happen to me. It was 9 o'clock on a Friday night when I arrived at the last gas station of the day. It was a small station on the outskirts of a town in the state of Puebla. My assistant, Ramiro, and I got out of the truck, spoke with the station manager, and while he handled the paperwork and protocol, I went to connect the hose to the underground tank's intake. It's a delicate process, and since Ramiro was still new, I preferred to do it myself, especially at night when visibility is worse. I leaned down to attach the hose, and at that exact moment I heard a clear voice, muffled by metal. I couldn't understand what it was saying at first. It was a woman's voice, and that immediately confused me. I looked around, expecting to see a woman nearby talking to me, but there was no one around. In the distance, I saw Ramiro speaking with the station manager, and on the other side of the pumps there was a car. I thought maybe the voice had come from there. I went back to focusing on my work. But a moment later I heard the voice again, still muffled like a metallic echo, as if it were coming from behind a wall. This time I understood it clearly. A rough laugh broke the silence, followed by words I'll never forget. It told me that my death was near. I froze. I looked around, expecting to find someone playing a sick joke on me, but there was no one. I kept going, trying to ignore it, but the voice repeated the same thing, that my death was close. By then, I had finished connecting the hose, and the gasoline was already flowing into the tank. It made no sense for a voice to be coming from a fuel tank, let alone one saying something so dark. And then suddenly I felt a mild pain in my arm and chest. My vision blurred and I began to stagger. I raised my voice to call out to Ramiro, but later I learned he couldn't hear me. He only ran over when he saw me collapse to the ground. I was having a heart attack. The pain in my chest spread down my arm, and I nearly lost my life right there. Thank God the father of a family that had just arrived at the station was a doctor. He stepped in immediately and saved my life. He and his wife took me to a hospital, and I survived. To be honest, I don't remember much of that night, because I was drifting in and out of consciousness. The pain clouded my mind, so I can't say for certain that what I'm about to describe was real. But I can say that I experienced it as if it were completely real. While they were taking me to the small hospital in that town, I felt like someone was mocking me. A muffled female voice. At first, I thought it was the doctor's wife, but she wasn't speaking. She was just checking me, making sure I didn't move. I looked up toward the ceiling, and there it was. A horrible face. An old woman, deeply wrinkled, with a twisted nose and blackened teeth, drooling and spitting down at me. I knew no one else could see her, because neither the doctor nor his wife reacted to her laughter. When we arrived at the hospital, the doctor ran inside, and orderlies pulled me out of the car. A dark shadow followed me the entire time. Even though I could no longer see her face, the old woman kept talking to me, telling me my death was coming, that I would die soon, that I should just give up. But I didn't want to listen to her. I focused on staying conscious, on holding on fighting so they could save me. I heard frustration in her voice when I resisted. And when Ramiro arrived, along with my wife and my eldest son, I knew I had to keep going. At some point during the night, I fell asleep. In my dreams, I remember thinking that I had died, but I woke up the next morning in intensive care. I had in fact suffered a heart attack. The doctor who helped me at the gas station worked at that hospital and took it upon himself to continue treating me. He saved my life, and I will never be grateful enough. As for the dark shadow and the mocking voice telling me to give up, I never heard them again. I was hospitalized for several days, but thankfully my eldest son had insurance, and everything turned out fine. Both the doctors and I were surprised because I'm a fairly healthy 50-year-old man. I've never smoked, I don't drink alcohol. My wife cooks healthy meals and I'm not overweight. There's no history of heart disease in my family. In the end, they attributed it to stress. But that explanation never fully satisfied me, because I'm not someone who lets small things overwhelm me. What matters is that I survived. And from now on, I know I should be grateful for every single day of life I'm given. And I will never forget that night, when a strange voice warned me of my death. Or who knows? Maybe that thing caused my heart attack in a way that can't be explained. What I'm about to share I saw with my own eyes, and even now I struggle to believe it. I've thought many times that maybe I misinterpreted everything, or that exhaustion made me hallucinate. But those are just excuses. I know what I saw was real, and now I'm going to tell it. I was driving down through Baja California on my way home to Baja California Sur. I had crossed from California earlier that same day, and had been sitting behind the wheel for far too many hours. It was late at night, around 10 or 11, and traffic had thinned out until it was just me and the occasional semi-truck. I looked at my dashboard and realized I only had a quarter tank left. That worried me a little. I don't know those highways very well. I don't travel often. But about 10 kilometers ahead, I spotted a gas station. Without exaggeration, I can tell you it was the only illuminated place on the entire horizon. I pulled up next to some old pumps and noticed there was an OXXO convenience store open right there. There were no other cars around and everything was silent. That detail is important. There was absolutely no sound. I got out of the car, and since no one was outside attending the pumps, I went into the OXXO. The man inside, about 50 years old, told me to pay for the gas and pump it myself. It was my first time doing that, honestly, but it wasn't difficult. I started filling the tank. I stood there watching it closely, and the only sound I could hear was the gasoline flowing, until suddenly I heard voices behind me. I jumped and turned around. It wasn't a whisper. It was a couple arguing loudly. On the other side of the pumps, there was a car I hadn't heard arrive, and that was the first thing that struck me as strange. It was parked at the opposite pump, under the same light. A dark sedan, somewhat old. A woman stood near the passenger door. On the driver's side, a man. Both of them were dressed as if they belonged to another era. I wouldn't say it looked like a costume, but their clothing felt outdated for people who seemed no older than 30. I've always been observant, and I noticed the details. He wore straight-cut pants and a pastel plaid shirt tucked in with a belt. She wore a simple dress, knee-length, and her hair was pulled back. I turned away so they wouldn't realize I was watching and tried to ignore them, but it was impossible. They were yelling at each other intensely. She was speaking quickly, and he kept interrupting her with short, harsh replies. I couldn't understand every word, but I caught the essentials. She was accusing him of always drinking too much and embarrassing them. He laughed and told her she was the embarrassing one for bringing it up. From the way he slurred his words, it was obvious he was drunk. She continued insulting him, calling him a drunk and useless. But suddenly her sentence ended in a scream. I felt something was about to go terribly wrong. I had the impulse to turn around and tell them to calm down before things escalated. I turned. But I didn't have time to say anything before the man, now standing in front of her, reached into the glove compartment. I caught a glimpse of the metal of a handgun, and I ducked just before hearing several gunshots. My body froze where I was. The only thing moving was my heart, pounding hard and unevenly. I couldn't see what happened next, but since it had been at point-blank range, I assumed the woman was dead, and that I would be next for witnessing it. My body reacted on its own. I ran toward the OXXO, pushed the door open, and inside stood the same man who had helped me earlier, calm in a way I couldn't understand. He was less than 20 meters from the pumps, so logically he must have heard the shots. But he looked composed, only confused by my panic. After staring at me for a moment, he asked what was wrong. My voice wouldn't come out from fear. I had to steady myself against a shelf before I managed to shout that a man had just shot his wife outside at the pumps. The employee didn't even look toward the door. He held my gaze, took a deep breath and sighed, like someone had just told him the power had gone out again. I'm almost certain I heard him whisper again before explaining that what I had just seen wasn't real. I exploded, telling him he was crazy, and pulled out my phone to call the police. He told me not to, that they wouldn't find anything, and it would only create trouble for me for making a false report. I stared at him thinking he was irresponsible, but something inside me made me pause. I looked toward the pumps again. There was no sound. No one chasing me. And then I remembered. I hadn't even heard the car arrive before I heard the argument. I angrily asked him what I had just seen. Calmly, he explained that 40 years ago, a crime had taken place right there. A couple's argument that spiraled out of control. The man lost control and shot his fiancée. Then, realizing what he had done, he took his own life. He said he had been a child when it happened, but remembered it clearly. The tragedy didn't end there. Every so often someone sees it happen again, as if that moment is condemned to replay itself over and over for eternity. I couldn't believe it. I asked him why I had seen it and not someone else. He simply said he didn't know, that these things happen without reason. When I asked what I was supposed to do now, he told me to finish pumping my gas and leave calmly. Easy for him to say. In the end, he had to walk outside with me because I didn't dare go alone. I checked where the woman in the car had supposedly been. There was nothing. No blood, no body, no shell casings, not even tire marks as if someone had sped away. Nothing at all. My tank was already full. I removed the nozzle and left after saying goodbye to that strange man. To be honest, he must have witnessed that scene many times to remain so calm. As I drove away, I glanced at the gas station in my rearview mirror. Nothing looked out of place. And the rest of my trip was completely normal. Nothing else that frightened me. Let's continue. I'm afraid of flying. Honestly, the only way I could get on a plane would be sedated. And even then, the idea of air travel fills me with a kind of deep rejection I can't explain. So when I want to visit my sister in Buenos Aires, I do what I have to do. I get in my car and drive across half the country if necessary. I've lived in Bariloche for 15 years, and it had been a while since I'd seen her and my brother-in-law. The last 2 times they had come to my place, so this time I wanted to surprise them. I packed everything, got in my car, and started heading north. Patagonia is vast, and even though the landscape is beautiful, the drive can become monotonous when you're alone. It was July and it was cold. I had to drive slowly because of the snow and ice. I was bundled up in layers, and honestly, the trip was proving more exhausting than I had expected. I think it was around 9 or 10 at night, and I was about 20 minutes away from the inn where I planned to stay. Suddenly, I saw a gas station and decided to stop. I still had half a tank, but if I didn't have to stop the next day, that would be better. I also wanted to buy something to eat since I didn't know if the inn had a restaurant open. As I approached, I was surprised by how modern the station looked. There were no other cars, no trucks, no people nearby. That detail is important. The station was completely empty and brightly lit. I didn't see anyone when I arrived. I parked, got out, and the cold hit my face like someone had opened a giant freezer door. I paid at the machine, grabbed the nozzle, and started pumping gas. At first, it was a normal stop. The numbers ticked upward slowly, and the only sound was the pump running. I could see a few houses near the road farther ahead, and I imagined the inn must be close. My mind was wandering when I suddenly felt a strange chill. It wasn't from the cold. That was already there. It felt more like someone had run an ice cube under my coat, starting at my waist and sliding up along my spine. It was deeply unpleasant and made me freeze in place, my hand still on the pump handle. I waited for it to pass, assuming it was just my body reacting. But it didn't go away. A second later, I felt something even clearer. Movement in my hair, as if a hand had grabbed it near the back of my neck and brushed it aside. It wasn't wind. There was no wind. This time I reacted. I threw an elbow backward, thinking some creep had touched me, and turned around expecting to see someone too close to me. Instead, I saw a white silhouette, almost like fog, that faded into the air. My chest tightened and my fists clenched as I stared at the empty space. My car was right there, windows closed. I was alone under the station lights, waiting for someone to step out from behind the pumps, because I still couldn't process what that white shape had been. But deep down, I knew something strange had just happened. Some people would rationalize it and calm themselves down. I can't. I've been superstitious since I was a child, and that makes me react differently. Instead of analyzing it, I run. And that's exactly what I did. I shoved the nozzle back into place as best I could and ran toward the store. At that point, I didn't care about looking crazy. I pushed the door open. Behind the counter was a young woman with a tired expression. She looked concerned and asked what was wrong. I told her without going into too much detail that something strange had happened outside and that I didn't want to go back out alone. I didn't describe everything. I was embarrassed to sound irrational, and I didn't want her to refuse to step outside with me. I even saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, like she thought I might be setting her up. I couldn't blame her, but in the end she kindly agreed to come outside with me. We walked around the station together. When she asked what had happened, I explained that I had felt someone outside with me, that something had touched my hair, and that I'd seen a white mist-like shape vanish. I must have sounded insane because she stopped and stared at me. At least she didn't laugh or mock me. We checked the pumps. There was no one. She told me that strange things sometimes happen out on the road. And she was right. I thanked her for coming out with me, even though she was probably breaking company policy. We went back inside, and I stayed for a while, drinking coffee and talking with her about strange experiences. That's when I learned that unusual things had happened to her too, though not at the station but in town. Different events, unrelated to mine. Then I bought what I needed for dinner, paid and thanked her again. When I stepped outside thinking I felt calmer, that's when I saw it. Just for a second, but I saw a silhouette standing next to my car on the driver's side. I couldn't make out a face, clothes, or age, but I saw the shape. Tall and dark. A presence standing there as if waiting for me. It vanished almost immediately, but that was enough to make me scream. I lost my breath. For a moment, I considered running back inside the store to call the girl again. But I didn't want to bother her anymore. I didn't want to stand there under the lights, freezing, staring at my car either. So I took a deep breath and walked as fast as I could. The silhouette didn't reappear, but that didn't reassure me. I could feel in my chest that it was still there, watching me. I reached the car, opened the door quickly, and as soon as I sat down, I planted myself firmly in the seat and said out loud, as if speaking to someone I couldn't see, that it was not welcome in my car, and that it needed to get out. I said it seriously, doing everything I could to keep my voice from trembling. Maybe it was suggestion, or maybe it really worked. but I felt slightly calmer afterward. I fastened my seatbelt and continued my drive. I left the station and got back onto the highway. The inn was 15 minutes away, and during that stretch my imagination tormented me. I kept expecting to see someone sitting in the back seat, or to feel my hair touched again. But none of that happened. It was over. That was one of the most chilling moments of my life, and I sincerely hope it never happens again. Let's continue. The first time I covered my brother's shift at the gas station was also the first time I had a supernatural encounter. And I have to admit, it was far less subtle than I ever would have expected. My brother worked at a station just outside of town, right off the highway. It had 2 pumps, a small store that closed at 11 at night, and some restrooms in the back. Sometimes truck drivers would park overnight in a dirt lot beside the station, but on those particular nights no one stayed there. Cars flew down the highway and the place was usually empty. This was 3 years ago. I had just turned 20 and was still living with my parents. I didn't like being out at night outside of town, but my older brother was sick. Fever, coughing, and the boss wasn't going to close the station just because he felt bad. Someone had to cover the shift, so I offered to help. My brother explained it to his boss, then gave me instructions as if he were lending me his car. Basic things, how to use the pumps, how much to charge. Up until then, everything was normal. But just as I was about to leave, he grabbed my arm tightly. He looked exhausted, but in that moment, he wasn't speaking like someone who was sick. His seriousness surprised me. He was always joking around. But I know my brother, and I could tell he wasn't kidding. He told me that if, sometime during the night, I saw a green Honda Civic pull in, I shouldn't serve it. He said it plainly. I asked if it was something dangerous, criminal activity or something like that. He said no. According to him, it wasn't that they would hurt me or take me, though he couldn't explain what it was either. He just told me that if I saw that car, I shouldn't stay by the pumps. He repeated very specifically, if I saw it, I should walk calmly to the restrooms, not look to the sides, and stay there without looking at the car until it left. I laughed. Even though he said it seriously, it sounded so strange that I thought he was just trying to scare me. But he didn't laugh. He told me not to be smart or brave about it, and that hopefully I wouldn't see it. But if I did, I needed to listen to him. That was the last strange thing he said before going back to bed. The first night I spent the entire shift with that idea in my head, but nothing happened. 2 pickup trucks came through, then a semi, a taxi, and another truck. The night felt long because I was alone and had no one to talk to. Even my phone died on me. Finally, around 2 in the morning, I went home. The second night, something did happen, and I understood my brother hadn't been joking. It was close to 1 in the morning. I was sitting on a chair near the door of the closed store, staring at nothing. I had nothing to do, and my phone was dead again. I was even considering leaving a little early when I saw headlights approaching from the highway. At first, I thought it was a semi because of the distance and brightness. But as it got closer, I realized it was a car. It pulled into the station and stopped in front of one of the pumps. My breath caught in my throat when I saw it was a dark green Honda Civic with tinted windows. I froze, a rag still in my hand. It felt like my body suddenly weighed twice as much, and at the same time like the entire world had gone silent. It was a strange, chilling sensation, and I instantly knew something wasn't right. I stayed where I was, waiting for something normal to happen, for a window to roll down, for someone to gesture at me, for them to ask to fill the tank. But nothing happened. With the tinted windows, I could only see my own reflection. The headlights remained on, but no door opened. And in that silence, I heard my brother's voice in my head telling me to go to the restrooms if it ever happened. I walked toward the restrooms, not running. I don't know why, but I wanted to act like everything was normal. I went inside and watched the car from the doorway. I would step out for a few seconds, then step back inside. I didn't hear doors, footsteps, or voices, just the distant hum of the engine running. The fifth or sixth time I looked out, the car was gone. I looked both ways down the highway but didn't see any taillights. It had disappeared. I went back to where I'd been sitting with a strange feeling in my body. The crickets started chirping again. I convinced myself it had all been a prank orchestrated by my brother. Otherwise, it didn't make sense. A car pulls in, parks, doesn't ask for anything, and leaves. For what? If they wanted to scare me, they could have done something else. It was just, strange. I worked the rest of the week normally and avoided mentioning it to my brother. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of thinking his joke had worked. But on the last night I was covering his shift, it happened again. It was nearly 1 in the morning. I was sweeping when I felt that same unnatural silence. Then I saw it. The same green car approaching. This time I considered walking straight to the restrooms before it even pulled in. But I felt ridiculous listening to my brother. I thought maybe one of his friends owned that car and was filming me from inside, laughing while I hid in the bathroom. That idea made me angry, so I decided to stay and see who they were and what they wanted. The car pulled in and stopped in front of the pump again, just like before. It remained there doing nothing. I was about 10 meters away, standing to the side. The restrooms were behind me. The car was in front of me, headlights on. I slowly walked closer. In my head, my brother's warning kept repeating, but my pride pushed me forward. I stood right next to the passenger window, almost pressed against the glass, trying to see inside. At first, I only saw my reflection and the light above me. I shifted slightly to the right, closer to the windshield, and from that angle I could see more. I saw the dashboard, the steering wheel, the seats. The engine suddenly revved, but there was no one inside. I'm certain of it. There was no way someone could have been hiding beneath the steering wheel. I could see the space clearly from where I stood. In that moment, I understood my brother's warnings and felt like an idiot for not listening. The Honda didn't move right away. It stayed there for another second. Then it drove off calmly, just like it had arrived. I watched it disappear down the highway. Its taillights faded into the darkness, and then went out, as if its invisible driver had turned off the engine. I stood there, staring at the exit, with the feeling that I had just reached into something I wasn't supposed to touch. That night I left early. I got into my brother's car and drove home faster than usual, half expecting that Honda Civic to appear in my rearview mirror. Days later I told my brother what I'd seen, though not in detail. But he guessed. He asked if I had noticed. When I asked what he meant, he said, "Did you notice there was no driver?" That's when I knew he hadn't been joking. He told me he had seen it about 6 times in the 3 years he'd worked there. His boss had seen it too. It wasn't something we were imagining. And to this day, they still haven't found an explanation. Continuamos. Hi, my name is Arturo, and this happened to me in 2010 when I was 30 years old. My girlfriend and I were driving from Mexico City to Veracruz to meet her family and spend a few days on vacation. We left without rushing and stopped wherever we felt like it, grabbing food, taking pictures. We looked like tourists. I should mention that it had been years since I had left Mexico City. All the stops and breaks delayed us quite a bit, and night fell. My girlfriend fell asleep and I kept driving, my eyes fixed on the road. I can't say exactly when something changed, but the highway grew darker the farther we went. At some point, the streetlights disappeared completely, and the surroundings turned into a solid black wall on both sides. My headlights were the only source of light, and the road became eerily empty. I turned on some music at low volume to calm myself without waking her, and that's when I checked the dashboard. I had less than half a tank left, and I preferred to refill before continuing. My throat was dry too, so I figured I'd grab a coffee. Coincidence or not, about a minute later I saw some distant flickering lights. They blinked irregularly, like a bulb about to burn out. As I got closer, I thought maybe it was an old gas station. When the lights stayed on for a moment, I could make out a large structure. But as I reduced the distance, I realized it looked abandoned. The structure appeared worn, and the sign was no longer readable. The flickering lights didn't illuminate the entire place, only a patch of concrete around the pumps. Once I noticed that, I decided not to take the entrance into the station and stayed on the highway. I saw no other cars, no open convenience store. But when I was parallel to the station, I noticed someone standing there. There was a man by the pumps. He was standing still, facing the road. When the light flickered fully on, I could see him clearly. And when it went dark, I lost him again. I slowed down and drifted toward the side lane to get a better look, maybe even ask if they were actually open. I hadn't fully braked when I noticed the shadows around him. They weren't normal shadows. They were dark shapes that appeared and disappeared with the flicker of the light. I didn't see them all at once, just in fragments. First one near the edge of the roof, then another toward the back of the station, then another beside one of the pumps. Each time the light went out, those shapes seemed to shift positions. The image paralyzed me. My foot was on the accelerator, but I couldn't react. And in that frozen moment, I realized the man who had been staring blankly at the road was now staring directly at me. The flickering light didn't let me distinguish his facial features or his hair. I think I saw a gray shirt, maybe with a Pemex logo. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that suddenly my body reacted. It felt like adrenaline shot straight into my bloodstream. I pressed the accelerator because I had the overwhelming sense that I was seeing something I wasn't supposed to see. I thought about my girlfriend sleeping beside me, about her family waiting for her, about my own family waiting for us back in Mexico City. I couldn't stay there, and yet I looked in the rearview mirror. The man in the shadows were gone. I drove as fast as I could, reaching 100 kilometers per hour. But despite my hyperventilating, despite the engine roaring, my girlfriend never woke up. That detail has always bothered me. She's not a heavy sleeper, but something kept her asleep until everything returned to normal. After a few minutes, I reached a better lit stretch of highway, and in the distance I saw another gas station, this one fully illuminated, with cars parked outside a convenience store. My girlfriend suddenly woke up on her own. When I stopped to fill up, she went inside to buy coffee. While she was gone, I asked the attendant about the gas station behind us. I didn't mention the shadows or the employee I had seen. I just asked if there was another station a few kilometers back along the route. He looked confused. After thinking for a moment, he assured me there wasn't one in that part of the road. Only another much farther ahead. I thanked him, but since my girlfriend hadn't returned yet, I insisted a little, describing the flickering lights and the Pemex employee. His answer was the same. According to him, there was no gas station anywhere near that stretch in that direction, and he was sure, because he was from a nearby town. When my girlfriend returned with the coffee, I thanked the man again, and we parked for a bit. We stood outside drinking coffee beside the car. I didn't mention what had happened until much later, after the trip was over. That early morning we continued until we reached her family's town in Veracruz. 2 weeks later, it was time to return to Mexico City. That time, I was paying close attention to the road. I wanted to confirm that station existed. So did my girlfriend. I recognized the first gas station, the real one where we had stopped, and my heart began to race, knowing that any moment I would see the other one on the horizon. I kept driving, waiting. It never appeared. We passed through that stretch with our eyes fixed on the distance. My girlfriend examined every meter of the roadside, but we never saw a roof, never saw pumps, never saw the old warn sign I had seen that night. Nothing. At some point, I realized I was gripping the steering wheel the same way I had that night. I forced myself to relax and tried to find a logical explanation. If it was real, someone dismantled an entire gas station in 2 weeks without leaving a trace, and that makes no sense. If it wasn't real, then my mind fabricated an entire station, complete with an employee and shifting shadows. And that possibility is even more disturbing. My girlfriend believes I saw something that wasn't from this plane. I honestly don't know what to believe, and I suppose I'll never get an explanation. Continuamos. I work at a gas station in Mexico City. I won't say the exact location because I still work there. And ever since what happened, I don't like the idea of someone treating it like a joke and showing up to prank me. The station looks like any other. Bright white lights, a few pumps, and the constant sound of cars coming and going. That night was a normal shift. As it got later, the station became relatively empty. I was pretty bored, and my coworker had gone to the restroom a few minutes earlier. During those dead hours, if the supervisor wasn't around, I'd find ways to distract myself. So I stepped a little away from the pump to a spot where I could see most of the station, sat on a low wall and pulled out my phone to check messages. I started chatting with my girlfriend to pass the time. I think I had only been there a couple of minutes when, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a blue car with tinted windows pulling up to one of the pumps. What was strange wasn't that a car arrived. It was that I hadn't heard it approach. Normally you hear the engine, but this car seemed to appear without drawing attention, and it caught me off guard. I jumped up and walked quickly toward the pump, almost jogging, still holding my phone. I adjusted my uniform and approached like always, saying good evening and asking how much gas they wanted. The car was stopped, but the driver's window was still up. The windows were so dark I couldn't see anything inside. It's not illegal, but after serving so many customers every day, it always feels unsettling when a car like that pulls up and takes too long to roll down the window. I greeted them again more clearly this time, but there was no response. That's when I realized I still had my phone in my hand, so I turned slightly to put it in my pocket. I wasn't looking at the window anymore when I heard the glass slide down. When I looked back up, I saw something that still makes me sick to remember. The driver of that vehicle did not have a normal face. It wasn't the face of someone who had just been in a fight, or someone with scars, or even someone badly burned. It was violently disfigured, like the face had been torn open, shredded. My brain took a second to understand that it was supposed to be a person, because it looked more like a bloody pulp. I could see teeth, and what I interpreted as broken bone. Blood was running down and staining the chest, as if the shirt were soaked. And the worst part was that it didn't look fake. It looked too real. I've seen masks. My girlfriend is a professional makeup artist. I've seen firsthand what she's capable of after hours of work. But that man's face looked nothing like makeup. It was mangled. The blood moved. A metallic smell reached my nose. I froze, afraid that at any moment that mass of flesh would attack me. And suddenly I let out a scream. I had never screamed like that before. I was terrified. My body reacted on its own. I stepped back and tripped against the pump. The driver, or whatever was in that driver's seat, said nothing. I don't even think it could have, because there was no visible mouth in that mass of flesh. It didn't gesture to calm me down. It didn't give any sign that it was a joke or a hidden camera. It just stayed there, staring at me. Or at least, I think it was staring, because it didn't have visible eyes. Its neck was angled toward me. That's all I know. Honestly, I don't remember if I screamed again or tried to run and stumbled. Everything became blurred at that point. But I could feel the presence of that thing fixed on me. It didn't move. It was as if its only purpose was to be seen by me. I didn't take my eyes off it because I thought it might do something. And the only thought running through my head was, that cannot be alive. It didn't last long, even though it felt endless. Maybe 5 seconds passed. Suddenly, the thing pressed the accelerator. The car sped off as fast as it had arrived, almost as if it were fleeing. Just a second before my coworker came out of the restroom. It disappeared down the avenue within seconds. I stood there shaking, watching the taillights fade. My coworker ran toward me, asking if I had been robbed. My first instinct was to look around, expecting someone to be laughing or filming. Then I asked him if he had seen the blue car. He had seen it, but he hadn't seen who was driving. The station was empty. No one had been near me. I leaned against the pump because my legs felt weak. My throat hurt from screaming and my mouth was dry. But more than fear, what I felt was disgust. I told my coworker what I had seen, in detail. He looked at me like I might be exaggerating. He asked if I'd been robbed. I insisted that the driver had only shown me his face and left. My coworker isn't the type to mock me, and I'm grateful for that. But he didn't fully believe me. He suggested it might have been a car accident victim looking for help. That thought made me feel guilty for a moment. But the more I replayed the scene in my head, the stillness, the silence, the extent of the damage, the more convinced I became that it wasn't someone alive. I didn't argue with him. I finished my shift because I couldn't just leave, but I stayed nervous for the rest of the night. When the shift ended, I went home feeling unclean. Not physically, but mentally. I showered as soon as I got there, lay down, closed my eyes, and saw that face again. It was that simple. I'd close my eyes and the disfigured face would appear in my mind. That was the first night. After that came several bad weeks where I couldn't stop dreaming about it. Not every night, but often. In the dreams, the car would arrive again. I'd hear the window rolling down. When I looked up, it would be there. And sometimes it would drag me into the car. Other times, the car wouldn't leave. It would stay there for hours, and no one could see it except me. When I tried to run, my legs wouldn't respond. In some dreams, the window would roll down and no one would be inside. But I would still feel watched. Every time I woke up sweating in the middle of the night, it became harder to fall back asleep. My girlfriend started making tea and home remedies to help me rest. But eventually I had to take medication to sleep peacefully again. I became afraid of falling asleep because I expected the nightmares to return. It also started affecting me at work. I would stare at cars, thinking any one of them might contain that faceless driver from my dreams. I became paranoid. Of course, nothing ever happened. People came to buy gas, not to scare me. At some point, I told a supervisor because he noticed I was distracted. He's a very spiritual man and promised to check the security cameras to see if they had captured anything. Unfortunately, the footage deletes every 72 hours, and it had already been a week. Over time, the nightmares have faded. I've been less paranoid. I've even gone months without thinking about that night. But sometimes the fear comes back. When a car pulls up late at night to the pump, I still think I might see that thing again. So far I haven't. Only God knows what I saw that night. but I can say without hesitation that it was the most horrifying thing I've ever witnessed. Thanks for listening. One more story won't hurt. Click it.